All right, we are live. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show for a special Sunday live with our new friends, Leslie and Stephen Shaw of the Abduction 101 podcast. And they have a book. We are live. Oh, I hear some noise. And they're also author of the book. I'm sorry, I'm looking for the title right now.
It's who
Who
they
they,
are and what
yeah,
they're up to.
who they are and what they're up to. And they're also featured in a documentary called Who They Are that has actually 408,000 views on YouTube. And Aaron and I just both watched it and it was excellent. So we'll be getting into some of that. But before we get started, just a few quick announcements. If anyone is interested in joining us in Hawaii on April 20th in our conference on the Big Island, there's still a few tickets available, but if you can't make it in person because it is kind of last minute, we do have virtual passes available for $55. It's a great deal. And for the people that will be there on site, if anyone is interested in doing Lisa Thompson's UFO tour, she's going to be offering it every night. She has the military grade night vision goggles. You can sign up for that separately. That's a separate ticket. You can do it on the website or you can purchase a ticket there on site if you're interested. And if anyone is interested in our Secret Space Program documentary, that is also available now on our Patreon, and that can be found through our website along with the Hawaii tickets, journeytotruth.online. That link is below if you're interested. And without any more announcements, I think that's all I had to say. So welcome to the show, guys. Welcome, Leslie and Stephen. How you doing?
Thank
Oh,
you so much for having us.
thank you. Good morning. Good
Yeah,
afternoon.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
the good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at. I'm sorry, the documentary was really well produced and it was based on your experiences and a book that you guys wrote. And
Mm.
Stephen, I believe that you were a lifelong abductee, and in fact, I
Mhm.
believe it happened. It was your family abductees, right? It's been happening for generations. So maybe you could let us and the audience know kind of how this all started happening for you, and then we can get into some of the more current theories and stuff.
Yes, just to remind you, yeah, it goes back at least 4 generations in my family. I'm from British background, British, Scottish, Irish, Welsh, all that area of the world. I did my 23andMe, so I know where my genetics are from to make sure. But anyways, this is a phenomena that when I was growing up as a child, that we had this family spirit guy called O'Glegley that would show up and help people out or, sometimes save people's lives, throughout our family bloodline. And I just thought that this was a cool kind of thing that, maybe I'll see O'Glegley, maybe I won't. Other people that had seen the entity always would appear as a 6.5 foot tall, skinny character. So anyway, so I grew up. I was starting to get visited when I was 3 years of age. I would be visited in my bed, and I was being like jumped on, or like jumped on like by this invisible being. At first, I thought it was like a cat or something like that, but it had 2 legs, and it was like jumping playfully on my stomach,
And invisible, so
and invisible.
not a
Okay,
cat.
so
Definitely not a
growing
cat.
up in a family that came from England, grew up in World War II as children, you know, we were a little different than regular people. My dad was a cabinet maker. So anyway, so fast forwarding to 1979, January of 1979. This is very important. This is not really covered well in the documentary, unfortunately. There were simultaneous events that were happening to our family in 2 different locations, 350 miles apart at the exact same time. One of the houses that we were building, 'cause my dad and I were builders, okay, at the time, and we're up in Sonora, California. We were building this house. My brother, my younger brother, and my mom were living there, and he is going to school. He was, 6 years younger than me, so he would have been 13 at the time. So anyway, the first night started where my dad came to breakfast and said, Steve, my closet door was open and closed on me last night, and I just was thinking, oh, Dad, it was a dream. My dad was a cop in England for 4 years, so he was like a no nonsense guy. He was in the RAF, so he was level headed guy. So anyway, so we went to work. So the next night, I was at that point in my life, I was just starting to study Tai Chi. I became a teacher for 23 years, and I'm a master of it. So anyway, I was reading this book by Paramahansa Yogananda called Metaphysical Meditations, and I just thought this is really cool stuff. So I'm 18 years of age, right? So I give it to my dad. I said, Dad, you should read this, right? It's like 9 o'clock at night, and I give it to my dad, and about 20 minutes later, came into my room with this weird look on his face. Said, Stephen, I'm hearing silver bells on the wall. I thought, okay, Dad. So I went into the living room, and sure enough, there are these ding, ding, just like silver bells, like the song, right? Coming from inside the wall by the fireplace. And we're just looking at each other, bang on the wall. So I said, let's get Karen, my sister. My sister was kind of like, not really wanting to deal with any of this kind of stuff at the time. And so my sister came in the room and says, where are those bells coming from? So distinctly from a 2x4 wall next to the fireplace. Okay, bells. Ding, ding. Went on for at least 10 minutes, banging on the wall, looking up the chimney. And then it stopped. So the next morning, we would always call my mom, to see how things are going before my brother went to school. And my mom, who was an automatic writer, just like every woman in the family was an automatic writer, okay, she said, the weirdest thing happened last night. About 9 o'clock at night, I heard this bell ringing and I thought that it was the phone ringing. So she picked up the phone and she was trying to have a conversation. There was like this deep baritone male voice saying, I am the invisible Oglegly. On Beachy or something like that, right? So I asked my brother, said, Philip, did the phone ring? He said, well, I didn't hear the phone ring, but mom certainly did. And she picked it up and she was trying to have a conversation happening at the exact same time that we heard the silver bells, 350 miles apart. Okay. The next night, I went to bed, my usual bed in my bedroom, and I was awakened by this sound in the air. And I just thought it's a fan or something like that. So I rolled over on my left side, and then the bed was pushed 2 times gently from the base. And I thought, well, Southern California, maybe it's a little earthquake. And then I try to ignore it, and then it's push, push. And now I'm getting a little worried. And then it's push, push, like
Harder
wake
each
up.
time.
And
Yeah.
then it was tap, 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 like a bony index finger on my right deltoid. Tap, 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 like wake up. So I rolled over and I'm scared and I'm angry at the same time. So I go, what? And there's this shimmery thing in front of me. Like I'm looking at it. And we lock for like 2 seconds and then it's blacked out. Told my dad about it. We have no idea what's going on at this point. So I was afraid to sleep in that bedroom. So the next night I decided to sleep in my work clothes on the sofa in the living room. And my piano was off to the right side because I'm a professional musician, you know, from time to time. And so anyways, I woke up about 5:30 in the morning. Again, this is January in Southern California. Okay, so it's dark. And I was looking at my piano thinking, what I'm going to play today, maybe some Emerson, Lake and Palmer or something like that, whatever. And I heard the fountain in the other room, so I was awake. I just didn't want to get up at 5:30. And then from behind me was the front door, and it was like this blue door opened, and this entity was just waiting there, 6.5 foot tall, skinny, with extra large head, and it just walked over to me to 20 feet in about a second and a half, bringing all the blue white light with it. The blue white light didn't flood the house, which is very important. It came with it, it stopped right by my head. I was laying face up, okay? So it came from behind me and it stopped. And when it stopped by me, my right side of my body just went completely numb. Okay, not paralyzed from the standpoint of like, being terrified, but this went, I couldn't move it. I could move my left hand, but I couldn't move the right side.
He couldn't even close his
I
eye.
could tell, I said, I'm going to see Old Gladly. This is Old Gladly, okay, that I've heard about, right? But this blue white, okay. And it bent down to me and it said, hi, Steve. Didn't say it in my head, said it in my ear, okay. And I'm thinking, I want to ask you questions, but will you let me look at you? Will you let me have a conversation? But the other half of me saying, dude, you can't move. So part of me is saying, you should be scared. And the other part is saying, I want to have a conversation. So anyways, that went on for about maybe a few seconds, maybe 5 seconds. Then it unbended and then it went back out, went through the door, whatever it had opened, took the light with it. And then I blacked out again. Told my dad at breakfast time and my sister, we were just not knowing what to think at this point. Okay. So anyways, 6 hours go by. It's 11:30 in the morning. I decided, Dad, I'll go down and get some food for us, right? So I reached into my right-hand side pocket of the pants I've been wearing to bed, and I pulled out the coins. This is not told in the documentary. For some reason, they did not address this. But anyway, the coins, all the coins, these are standard American coins, 1979, 78, right? They're all magnetic. Okay.
Mm.
They can be picked up by the edge, by the face. It didn't matter. My dad could do it too. Just picked up the coins, and there were a couple of 6-penny nails in there too, which is no big deal. But all the coins were completely magnetic.
And
Okay.
that's supposed to be impossible.
It's not.
They
I've
design
talked to scientists and other people about it. They can't explain it.
yeah, they
Okay.
design coins specifically to not become magnetic so they can go into vending machines and
So the
things.
only
Right.
regret I have is that I didn't like put them in a glass jar or like take pictures or something. This was 1979, right? I'm 18 years old, so technology, like, okay, I would have had to go find a camera or something. So anyways, the last night was the last episode of things happening where I have no recollection of this at all, but my dad told me at breakfast time that, there was this tremendous wall of blue white light outside of your bedroom door last night because our bedrooms were facing each other down the hallway. Wait, so he saw this blue white light just all encompassing my door, and he was getting out of bed because he was an ex-cop, right? So he's thinking like, what the hell is going on?
What's
Right?
all
So,
this then?
Right.
who is messing with my son? Right. Okay. And so
Right.
he's getting out of bed to go and check it out, and then this voice in his head said, Jeffrey, just relax, go back to sleep. Nothing's wrong with Steven. He's fine. And that's exactly what he did. And I have absolutely no memory. So I know that I have been tampered with. And this goes back, like I say, this goes back to our theory that this is a generational thing. So it's not just like these time travelers coming through and messing with us right now. This goes back at least 4 generations. Okay.
Hmm.
They tend to these things tend to come in clusters like that. His brother Philip had a cluster of 3 when he was 16.
That's why we know it's the tall grays.
Yeah, he woke up the first night with these 2 bright white lights shining into his window.
This is the house in Sonora, California.
And his window overlooked like a 40-foot drop or 20, 30-foot drop
20
down to the
The
creek
creek.
below. So this craft would have had to been up 30 odd feet in the air to shine the lights
There were
in.
2 of them.
And on the other side of this window, on the opposite, it was this mountain with trees. So there's no houses or cars back there or
No.
anything.
No roads.
And he stared at it for a few minutes and then blacked out. And then the next night, he was laying in bed and heard a scrabbling sound, and he thought it was the cat. And he reached down to pet the cat, and instead a hand grabs his wrist, and like a bony hand, and he felt this thrill of adrenaline, but then still passed out or blacked out.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the third night, he saw a tall gray alien standing in his bedroom doorway looking at him, and they stared at each other for a few seconds, and then again he blacked
This
out.
was early 1982 when he was 16, and he was not like into watching a bunch. My brother taught calculus for fun at a college level.
He was a brilliant man, but
He was a draftsman and engineer. I mean, he was not one for flights of fancy.
and when they were young, the boys were abducted too, but they saw them they tamper with memories, and the boys saw them as garden gnomes when they were little kids, like I think they try and appear less threatening, to the little children when they're
So we
taking
started
them.
putting things together basically and said, what, this is not adding up. This is not just a, especially when old Glegley saved my uncle's life in post World War II in Ceylon. And his first car he bought for his daughter, the license plate was Old Glegley. Okay, this is the guy who became a multimillionaire and was a brilliant man too, from England, from Wales and Great Britain. It's like, these type of people that are, they don't talk about this stuff just to kind of pull your leg. Okay.
Right.
So-
This is stuff that we've been experiencing. Our family bloodline from Germany to Scotland, England to California. This has been following us.
So we think O'Glegley was like a tall gray handler for the
Okay.
family,
That's
and
what I was actually going to ask. I was like, okay, so when you say O'Glegley, you're referring to this tall gray.
yeah.
And
Right.
and then also I want to just add something, talking about the coins being magnetic.
Correct.
There's a place in Mena, Arkansas, Board Camp Crystal Mine. It's a UFO Bigfoot hotspot, paranormal hotspot. And there was a famous UFO sighting out there, and they have it on film. This beam of light comes down, the whole story, you know.
Mhm.
The aluminum fence post in the area, I forgot how they figured it out, became magnetic. But not only just that, any metal that was left that's still to this day, any metal that is left at the site becomes magnetic. A paper
Wow.
clip, a coin, it doesn't matter. And not just magnetic, but polarized. It has a north and a south and everything.
Hmm.
There's been teams out there who've done investigations. So you're not crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
there's evidence of this happening elsewhere,
Yeah.
where non-magnetic metals become
Hmm.
polarized.
I surmised
Well,
he
like I
was
say,
ex
this happened in January 1979, and my dad and I are witnesses. And this is something that was like, this has happened. It happened, and it's real. I'm glad to hear. I'm encouraged to hear that it's happened other places
yeah.
too.
We hadn't heard any other
I've
magnetizing
I've
stories.
asked
So
people for a few years now, and I haven't. That's the first time I've heard about that.
yeah, and
Yeah,
aluminum is not supposed to be one of the metals that can be magnetized, right?
right. That's why it was so
Right.
Mhm.
anomalous. Um, I actually, so like, if you seen the show Expedition Unknown with Josh Gates, like
Sure, of course.
they went out there and filmed an episode, but I've been out there personally and I saw the phenomenon myself. Like
Wow.
it
Mhm.
absolutely, like if you can leave something, and he had us do it, like bring something that's not magnetic, we leave it there overnight, come back in the morning, and it becomes magnet. It's fascinating. So
Yeah.
We
uh
surmised he was abducted and during the abduction and exposed to some powerful electromagnetic field of some
Yeah,
kind.
because I don't remember waking up until about 7:30 in the morning. This happened at 5:30, and then I remember getting up, to get some coffee at 7:30. So
so,
anyways, it's just like it's encouraging to hear that this is not something that is one off.
And they continue to bother Steve to this day.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're physically abducting him anymore, but it seems like whenever he's in the astral state, they're waiting on the
Well,
other side of the
I
veil.
was just attacked December the 1st of 2025. I mean, I was definitely accosted by two big white guys.
Like men in black looking guys, in this we believe in the astral state.
They were both
yeah,
kind of baldish, but anyways, it was like one was at least about 6'5", and one guy he just basically pushed me up against the wall, and basically I was lifted off the floor too a bit. I was lifted off the floor, pushed against the wall, and my body was just neutralized. It wasn't paralyzed like people say, oh, it's sleep paralysis. No, it was basically it went numb. Okay, just like they put a feel on me. Okay,
yeah.
and they started checking me out. They started checking my nose, checking my mouth, looking down my throat, and I couldn't do a thing about it. There were two of them, right? So then they let me go after a while. Then I was mingling with some people we were all in a room. We're all dressed like in black and white.
Right.
All right. And then they came back and did the same thing. And this time I was able to say, what do you want? What do you need?
A
Why are you
question they
doing this?
a question they never answer.
And I got some answers from the smaller guy
You
who's
did?
still
Oh,
probably
I'm
about 6 foot,
sorry.
but it's like I got the answers at the time, but I can't remember what
Remember.
he said. He told me his name, whatever. And I asked him, why are you doing this? It was like you're doing a physical exam, which is interesting because this has happened during the waxing gibbous moon, which I've been tracking this now, that a lot of these encounters seem to happen during the waxing gibbous moon for me. When I do more of my astral traveling and when these events occur, when they come into my room or when I get accosted, whether it be physically or in the astral realm. But these things have been with me since at least the age of 3, and I probably had, I don't know how many thousands of encounters I've had, but for me, it's just like another thing. If somebody had that happen to them that hadn't had that happen to them before, they'd have to go see a psychiatrist or say,
Freak 'em
I've got
out,
to go
yeah.
to the hospital.
But for him,
Do,
it's like happened so many times now.
You,
It's
you're
just like
right. It
another
must be
part
going
of like
crazy.
whatever. Yeah.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Do you have, so I'm in here in Sedona, Arizona, and there's black helicopters all the time. One just flew by out the window as you were telling that story. Have you had encounters with black
Oh
helicopters,
yeah.
black vehicles, like maybe not in the astral realm, like
Oh,
in a
physical.
physical sense?
Yeah.
With eight witnesses, I can tell you the date, the time, and the year.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was out at Giant Rock. Do you know where that is?
Oh yeah.
That's
Giant
in
rock. Yeah, it happened
California
in
out
Giant Rock.
there
That's
near
Joshua Tree, right?
Joshua Tree. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
near the Integratron.
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah.
what's his name? George Van Tassel?
George Van Tassel.
Van
Yep.
Tassel built
Yep.
it. Yeah,
It's just up the road from there.
supposedly from
Yep.
information from a Venusian. But anyway, apart from that,
And the Marine base is there. The Marine Corps Air Ground
29
Combat Center.
Combat
Yeah.
Center, yeah, which I actually did duty on twice. I was in the military and
Nice.
also secondarily after that, helping with the
What branch?
training. I was Navy. I was a CB for 6 years.
Oh, great. Great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I did that. We were setting up base camps out there towards Camp Wilson back in 1983 when it was barely Camp Wilson. It was still out in the boonies at that point. So it's still really out in the boonies. But anyway,
Tell them about the helicopters. Huh?
that's what I'm getting to. Okay. Okay, this is June 11th, 2006. It was the full moon. You can check it out. A friend of ours was having her birthday party, and we had gotten access to the Integratron. So we got access to the upper story of the Integratron, which is where all the cool stuff happens.
The dome part.
Where you
yeah.
can whisper in one corner of the room and you can hear people clearly, whatever. And they had these crystal healing vases, and so we kind of like hung out there for a while. Then we went over, said let's go over to Giant Rock. So 9 of us went over to Giant Rock in a few different vehicles, and it's about 3 miles through the desert. It's not easy to get there, but you got to know where you're going. So we got to Giant Rock, and this turned on the music and drank a little bit of wine, and the girls were dancing, whatever. And it was full moon was coming up from the east, right? And my having being ex-military at that point, I know what a helicopter looks like. I've been in helicopters. So anyways, very clearly, these 2 black silhouettes of helicopters are being backlit by the full moon about 9 o'clock at night. And they're coming towards us. And I'm saying, hey, take a look, the helicopters are coming. And they're maybe a couple 100 feet up in the air, not that high, but a couple 100 maybe. And they come right over us, and they're zero noise. You wouldn't know they were there. The only reason we knew they were there is because they're being backlit by the moon. And the funny thing is that they went over the top of us, went right past Giant Rock, made a circle, then went right back to the 29 Palms Marine Base. And we were watching them the whole time, all 9 of us. And like say, we would have had no clue. If it had been a dark moon, we would have had no clue they're there. So I have seen them. Okay,
And
this was 2006.
And that's a commonly, at least I've heard that similar story many times, where it makes zero noise, exactly what you said, and even moves like a UFO. It doesn't move like a helicopter. It hits zero noise.
This moved like these move like helicopters.
Okay, or sometimes it does. And to me, it's like either, and this could be both happening. Either it's an actual UFO that's somehow making you see a helicopter that's
Right.
disguising itself, or it's just a helicopter with advanced tech that
Yeah,
free energy
reverse
tech
engineered alien
reverse
tech,
engineered.
perhaps.
That's like an ARV basically that doesn't use
Well,
conventional.
I don't know. Are you guys familiar with the book, The Dancing Wooly Masters?
I have that.
By
I have
Gary
that book.
Zanuck?
It's a great book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read that when it first came out. I read it. I got first edition, and I got the edition that had the thing that had they used to include this thing where it's a visual type of aid that they had in there that you could actually cancel out visual stimuli basically by the way you arranged the boards. You could make it look invisible. Okay, in the original copies of the book he would have that, but the later copies they didn't include that. But the same kind of idea is kind of true with sound. You can actually cancel sound by taking 2 wavelengths but making them counter to each other, and they basically hit each other. And when they hit each other, they basically leave a negative. They basically get 0 as far as a wavelength. So you basically get no decibels. You get no hertz. You get no sound. It's basically simple canceling. Basically hit each other and they cancel each other out. So so it's something that is probably not even that advanced technology, but I know from 2006 for sure, having seen it with witnesses, that it does exist.
So when I married Stephen and started hearing all these, stories of his abductions and, I'm a dutiful wife. I believed him, but I could only believe him 98%, There was still this tiny kernel of doubt. And then I saw my first UFO. We were together in, it was 2005, and driving back through Joshua Tree at night. And white light, look, just a white round light was moving in front of us, but it didn't seem to be moving like a plane or a helicopter, and it didn't have any of those blinking side lights on it. And it was above the road that we were heading towards it, and it got brighter and brighter suddenly, and then shot off at what I guess is about 20,000 miles an hour, just in ludicrous speed, like from the movie Spaceballs, just
Yeah.
zoom. And it went so fast that it streaked visually into a line that collapsed in on itself. And it was gone over the northern horizon in less than a second, maybe a quarter of a second. And it didn't ramp up to this speed. It just instantaneously went at this speed.
Right.
So, white light in the sky could be any number of things, but
Not with that behavior.
not with moving like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can't be anything else, right? And then so after
Right.
that, our research for our book really started in earnest. He was researching it before that, but
I started back in 91.
when I saw that, suddenly I believed him 100%, and we started actually working on. I was used to be a journalist. I still work for the paper part-time, but so journalists, one thing we're good at is research, and so we began really diving into the subject at that
Nice.
point.
So
Nice.
I have a question before we move on from that. Stephen, when you were in the military, did you recall experiencing any missing time during that time of your life?
No. Let me see. I was 19 to 25. Let me see that area. Well, actually, no, the thing that happened. Okay.
Before you answer real quick, I actually have to go pick up my son from something real quick. Sorry,
Oh,
didn't
Oh,
plan on this happening.
Okay.
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 Well,
Okay.
So
I'll see you, Aaron.
I'll be back in like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
No
Okay.
problem.
All
No
right.
All right.
problem.
All right, see you guys.
Well, actually, something did happen. I wasn't on military duty, but when I was 22, the most profound experience of my entire life happened. And I'm going to do a podcast just specifically on that as far as
It was
uh,
more like a religious experience.
it was
kind of,
something that I think that it helps to explain maybe partially of like, a lot of the unexplained things that people are experiencing. I mean, that time in my life, yeah, I did have a missing time, but it wasn't when I was on military duty. Okay, it happened.
just in that time
It
frame, right?
happened. It happened at 4:44 in the morning, December 26th of 1982. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it happened in Sonora, California, which turns out to be one of the biggest hotspots for UFO activity in the whole country,
Who knew?
Right.
which we had no idea about when we moved up there, when we started building our house up there.
It's funny because the lower house in Southern California is along the 33rd parallels, also kind of a UFO hotspot. And then they started building in Sonora, California, yet another UFO hotspot.
Yeah, it's just very strange, but it's like these attractors. But anyway, so yeah, to answer that broadly, yes, I did have experiences during that time frame, yes, but not while I was on military duty.
Right. We interview a lot of military whistleblowers and secret space program testimonies and stuff. And I'm just curious because you fit the bill. I mean, you check every box for somebody who could potentially have had military abductions as well and just not remembered, but that doesn't mean that you did. It just being a generational thing with you. That's why I asked. And,
It
and
doesn't
so,
mean it didn't either.
Yeah, sure.
I
right.
think
Well, yeah,
because sometimes we know he's been abducted with no memory of the event because his father saw the blue white light thing and he has no memory of that time.
I had things happening while I was definitely that I can recall now, like
Mhm.
at the Fallbrook house while I was still in the military, being visitations, the one with the triangular shaped being that was hovering by the beam, that happened when I was 23.
Mhm.
So I know that happened while I was still in the military because I did a lot of reserve duty after I did my initial training and my initial like service. Then I did reserve duty from 23 to 20 from 1983 to 86. But I was still doing the weekend a month and 2 weeks a year, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I was definitely having things happen during that time period for sure.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, be curious to know, like, have you ever done any, either of you, have you done any regressions like QHHT or anything like that, hypnosis?
Try.
We tried, but the block is just too
Yeah.
firmly in place, or
Right.
maybe he's just not ready
The last
emotionally. you
the
know?
last time I tried it with a gentleman, I got a little bit, fairly comfortable, but the second time, literally it was like this entity came out and started like talking in a different voice. And actually, like, you can't get me kind of thing. It's just like, and he basically cut it off at that point. It's like, it was like it wasn't me. It was
Mm.
just like something else was there. And I've been told too that I've got this entity, that by a couple different people that have said I've got this entity that is attached to my left side.
Like psychics.
Yeah. So
What,
anyway, I
I'm sorry,
know
what's
that
on the
there's
left side? Sorry. You have what?
like a being,
Oh,
or
entity. I'm
something,
sorry. Okay. That's what you
being,
said.
yeah. But we by the way, this harkening back to being tapped 3 times on the right
Oh
deltoid.
yeah, that's
Uh,
important.
I almost lost my arm in a an accident on the base in 2013, in September 2013, on the military base, and my shoulder was ripped and dislocated. I basically spent 2.5 hours in the most excruciating pain that
And
you
he,
can imagine.
yeah, he broke the shoulder girdle in 7 places
Yeah, it
and
was
tore everything in
all
the
the
shoulder.
rotator
Yeah,
cuffs were torn.
yeah.
I had absolutely, it was just amazing. The Dilaudid did nothing for the pain.
But they found on the X-ray, they found we think what was a tracking device.
Hmm.
But later the surgery, it was removed. It must have been vacuumed out during the surgery to
I
repair it.
still have the X-ray. I still have the X-ray
Yeah, but
photographs. I'm waiting to get it.
this little metal grain of
It
rice
was a
looking
grain of
thing.
rice, and they couldn't explain what was there doing so far away. So the bones were broken in the back, the scapular region in the back. So this was like this piece just sitting by itself here in the mid deltoid, exactly where I was tapped on when I was 18 years of age.
And I've
So
later years I read that Whitley Strieber said the same thing. The guy who wrote Communion, he
Mhm.
had a tracking device in his ear.
mhm.
And one time the gray alien tapped him 3 times right on that part of the ear. So I think that's what they do to tell you that they've put a tracker in you or whatever
Yeah,
this device of some kind.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. There's a number of places they can put implants, and they're so microscopic sometimes.
Mhm.
Dental, even in dental implants, we hear these stories all the time. So, I think you can't rule anything out as far as is
I
what they're
used to I
capable of.
used to listen to conversations when, again, this is when I was still in the military. Funny enough, you're bringing all this stuff up, right? This is toward the end of my military duty, and I was, on reserve duty at that point. And I used to take a nap during lunchtime. I was still doing cabinet making, and I had the house to myself, and I would just go in my bedroom and just lay down like at noon, and totally bright lights, no big deal. And I would be able to like hear like like two DJs talking to each other, like having this full-on conversation in English,
But
which
too far away to understand what they were
it
saying.
was clear as day. And at first time it happened, I thought, well, my neighbor Harold must have the radio on too loud, So I was really good at putting myself into like a deep delta state at that point in my life. I could really get into alpha state and delta as I was practicing all the Tai Chi and the meditation techniques. And I was really good at it. It was easy to do. So I would be able to get into that state, and I would hear these full-on conversations. So the first time I thought, well, it's got to be the television I left on, or it's got to be Harold. So I got up, and of course, nothing's on. So then I went back and said, "Oh, let's go back to relax again." And the same guys, the same two guys, same Caucasians sounding guys, were having this conversation, like an animated conversation. I thought, well, this is really cool. I wish I could remember what they're saying. And so I thought, well, maybe it's a one-off, right? So then a couple days go by, and I do the same thing again, and I'm able to like just relax and slow my breathing down, and then I start hearing the same conversation. I've talked to other people that say, well, some people, because of their dental work, whatever, they will hear like radio stations, but it's the same two guys both times, same time of day. And
So he's
that
like picking up,
this
a
this happened.
radio in his mind.
This is when I was 25, when I 20.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. Uh, could be explained away a number. There could be a number of explanations, but voice of God or voice to skull technology, which actually was an army technology before they removed it from the website, but that beams voices into your head. But this could have been something else too. You could have actually been picking up on something.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
But what? Who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
It's just one of those weird things because we brought up about like when I was still doing military duty. Yeah, I mean, yeah, when I think about it, a lot of things that were happening between the age of 19 and 25 for me. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting when we go back and really like create a timeline, a chronological timeline, and like way more happens than we realize until you start writing it down and like putting it in order. So you might be interested in, creating a timeline for yourself and see it like during
Hmm.
that military time and see what comes up. But as far as getting into like your research, so you had your sighting, Leslie, in 2005, and then
Hmm.
you guys start researching for this book and obviously, there's, mountains of information and evidence at this point. And, it's kind of funny to me, some of the current disclosures we're getting from the government, they're still pretending like they don't know, which is, laughable. But
Yep. And Arrow is worse than useless.
right,
All they're doing is spending their time pressuring whistleblowers to change their stories so they can create these false narratives.
Yeah.
And they came out, that Go Fast video. They came out publicly saying that they had debunked it. So I read the report, and they have in no way debunked it. They've managed to they say that with parallax views, they say that it's not as high as it appears to be. I mean, it's not as low as it appears to be. It's higher than it appears to be, and it's going a little slower than it appears to be. But that's all the report says. It doesn't say what it is or
right,
how it can fly with no visible means of propulsion. But they do this. They say out loud publicly, "Oh, it's been debunked," and then
right.
suddenly everybody starts repeating that. "Oh, that's been
Yes.
debunked. That's been
Yeah.
So
debunked." And
yeah, so this is fascinating because for one, I noticed that it's like they just slapped a label on it, and but it really hasn't been. But people are too lazy. They just rely on the fact that people aren't going to look into it, and they're like,
right,
oh, these experts must have looked into it and determined that this was a hoax or whatever. What is currently happening right now that I've been seeing on my feed on social media is allegedly all of a sudden now two different narratives are being debunked. The Travis Walton incident is now currently trending that it has been debunked. And then the famous Patterson Gimlin Sasquatch footage has
right.
also been, quote, debunked now. But all of a sudden, just now, in the same year, at the same time, the two most famous, incidents in each field has been officially now debunked. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh,
Well, I'm sorry. I wanted to answer this one because
Go ahead. Yeah,
I
please.
recently read the same thing on Instagram, but I responded to it by saying, "Well, you shouldn't pick on UFO incidents where there are 6 witnesses who have all passed lie detector tests." But also, in recent years, an investigation team found the exact spot where he was abducted, and they tested the trees around the clearing and determined that they have high radiation signatures and on these trees, and it's higher on the sides that are facing the clearing, and the trees are actually growing faster on that side versus the opposite side of the tree, so they're starting to grow more twisted like. So this is physical evidence that's
hmm.
backing him up.
Yeah.
And what was the other one? Oh, the Patterson Gimlin. Recently, a better copy of the film was discovered, and they did a special on it in this one show I like called "The Proof Is Out There," and they were able to zoom in tight on the calf muscle of the leg as it's walking, and you can see the muscle flexing and
Flexing.
unflexing and flexing. And when it flexes, the hair on it spreads out like would happen when an animal flexes a muscle, the hair spreads out.
Right.
And they then zoomed in on the foot as the thing is walking, and the toes are pointing slightly upward every step, and that is something that humans can't do because we have an arch on our foot, whereas the plantar region of Bigfoot is more like a hinge joint.
Right.
Yeah. Meldrum talks about it, what they call the metatarsal dermatoglyphs. Okay, as far as how the real Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, imprints, how you can tell the difference with the nodules and things like that. But it definitely, the evidence is it's like there's a couple grains of rice against it, but like a whole hill of rice that is for it. Okay, the Bigfoot Genome Project, I mean, it's been given a categorization of Homo sapien cognatus. Okay, I mean, it's just like, you can tell when they're worried because they start putting research and
Yeah, they
disinformation
start
out.
the debunking thing.
I
you
spent
know.
3 hours yesterday
Great.
watching the 27th, the senatorial hearing that just happened on March the 27th, just a couple days ago. Senators Moskowitz, Burchett, the Republican guy, and
Yeah, yeah.
Luna were the three main people that were interviewing George Knapp and three whistleblowers. Nudicelli, Wiggins, and Borland.
All
Okay,
three whistleblowers
and
testifying to
all
being harassed.
the
And
really interesting one that for me, one of the interesting ones was Wiggins. He's a senior chief petty officer, which I know what an SCPO is because I was in the military in the Navy, right? So he's like one from the top, right? So he's on the USS Jackson, 2023 off the coast of Southern California, and there's this USO that's 7 miles away from the ship that he's seeing it on radar, and they're seeing this boiling. They don't know what it is, right? So he went off of the radar deck to go check, to take a visual look with binoculars, whatever. And sure enough, this tic tac comes up out of the water, okay, hovering there, goes to about maybe 1,000 feet, stays there for a couple minutes, and then it shoots off by about Mach 2, he thinks, joins three other Tic Tacs, and then they just basically just disappear. All on radar, saw it, bunch of people saw it. Of course,
and then
Arrow says
them.
didn't
Yeah.
happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Same thing with Borland, same thing with Nudicelli. One was at Vandenberg, one was at Langley Air Force Base. These things are happening and they're all happening. And they're going out of the way. You know what? According to the hearing, which I spent 3 hours going through this thing, right? The level of proof they need now for like saying that this is alien technology from another planet. They're saying the only way to prove that is to go to that other planet and see that craft being flown by aliens. That's the level of proof they're saying. And they're
Like
saying, when I listen to the whole
impossible
thing,
proof. Yeah.
right, the level of proof. So the thing I got out of it was, guess what? You're saying they don't know. Bigelow doesn't matter. They don't know whether it's alien technology. They don't know where it's coming from, which really underlines our theory that this is terrestrial. Okay, this is terrestrial. That's why they're breeding with us. All these guys, they can't say. Their level of proof is you'd have to go to another planet to say, oh, it's coming from that planet. That's the level of proof they're asking for right now. God's honest truth. You can watch the hearing.
Right. Well, I think you made an important point. The fact that the reason that they're suddenly trying to debunk this stuff is because they're threatened.
Yeah.
So what are they threatened? Like why? It's funny to think that they think that they could even still control the narrative. Like the cat's
Right.
out the bag. It's not
Yeah.
like they think they can keep a lid on it, but I think researchers like us have, even as little or big of a following that we have, like I think we have a much more powerful voice than we even realize. Like
Yeah.
it goes a long way. So what is on the horizon that they're threatened by, and I think is some sort of an
Right.
inevitable disclosure potentially. What are your thoughts on that?
I find it very telling too that they're kind of lumping Bigfoot into the same debunking thing that they're trying to
Yeah.
do.
At the same
Because
time,
we think, we've heard so many reports of Bigfoot proximity to Bigfoot drains batteries.
hmm
And this is also a UFO ability, you know.
correct. Yeah.
And the way we see it is that the Sasquatch Genome Project came back with that Bigfoot is half human,
Mhm.
and the mitochondrial DNA is human, almost perfectly human. I think
Yes.
one thing is a gene is turned on versus off, but otherwise perfectly human. And then the nuclear DNA is coming back as an unknown primate. So
Mhm.
it's our supposition that the aliens are actually genetically engineering Bigfoots And we think that they are residing in deep underground cities
Mhm.
in the Earth's crust and launching their UFOs from there and creating hybrids with, they steal our DNA and they're creating these bizarre hybrids with that DNA because you can't breed an ape to a human and expect a progeny. So the fact that it's half human, we think proves that we're dealing with a genetically engineered creature,
Some sort of
and we think they're using them as sentries to guard the entrances to their underground bases, and also as surface recon, and possibly food gathering. They to go to the surface and bring down supplemental food
They're
sources.
frequently also seen with UFOs too. That's not
Right.
uncommon.
yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think all that's happening, especially, the underground cities and bases and the tunnel networks. I mean, there's so much. This
Right.
book right here, if you haven't read it, Genesis for the Space Race by John B. Leith,
Not
it
yet.
was material from 1980. Him and the researcher who wrote this are killed now. They were both former military,
Hmm.
former CIA, but it has a whole history of like inner Earth and then this ufology and these underground bases and
Right.
all this stuff. Doesn't get into Sasquatch, but I think it would dovetail perfectly with what you guys are
Sure.
covering. As far as the genetic experiments, I mean, that definitely falls in line with a lot of other, stuff that we've come across. So it's very interesting when you start zooming out and looking at it objectively like that. We've interviewed people and I've heard other like Illuminati whistleblowers and these people that claim matter of factly that not just Bigfoot, but these dog men are being genetically
Right.
bred. But Nathan Reynolds, a fantastic
And
list,
Mothman, any of the
right?
cryptids now can be lumped into that same explanation that they're being
Yeah.
created by, you
Well,
know,
let me finish my point really quickly. So what I'm
sorry.
saying is the dog men, and no, don't be sorry. The dog man in particular, what this guy Nathan Reynolds came out and said, they're being bred to do pretty much what you said, like either guard these facilities and or even assassinate people. As crazy as that sounds. So they'll
I
be
think
a
they may be abducting people as well.
right. So they'll be attacked by this crazy creature in the woods, and nobody is going to question. No, we're none the wiser to the fact that that might have been bred and sent to kill this person. You never know.
Right.
So
Because the dog man, it's going to have a lot of the pluses that a Bigfoot has. It's going to have the strength and the speed and possibly the intelligence, but it's going to also have that great dog sense of smell, that
right,
and I can see where they might breed these creatures
Well,
for their different traits.
yeah,
right,
you just look at what we're toying around with right now. Like, the real it's very realistic for human beings to live to be a healthy 150. The Chinese have been toying around with this with their eugenic stuff going back to the 1920s. I mean, if you keep up with this stuff, they're literally breeding clones of themselves, basically for replacement organs. This
yeah,
stuff is going on. It's not BS. They've already been doing the illegal organ harvesting market is huge. Okay, that was kind of like the older way of doing it. Now it's better
Right.
to do it where basically you have like a copy of yourself that you won't have organ rejection. You don't have to take anti-rejection drugs for the rest of your life. Even she has been caught on like saying, I'm only 75. I'm basically in my 70s. I'm only halfway through my life. They literally are doing this stuff. We're toying around with genetics so much that we're doing stuff that our cousins, as we call them,
Yeah, we call the
that have a
aliens cousins.
that have a 12,850 year advantage over us. This is like child's play for them. This is simple. Okay,
yeah,
that's why they see us as like 8 billion noisy tenants that you don't want to have in your attic living above you that are screwing up your environment. And that's why they always come back with the same message and they usually approach children with this. They say, stop playing with nuclear weapons and take better care of the planet. That
Right.
is their message almost universally every time.
right, yeah. And that book I just referenced, they talk about many different races living within the planet and say that they range anywhere from 150 up to 1200 years old based
Right.
on the group and where they reside and their level of advancement. But it
Yeah.
absolutely, I think even on the surface, there is life extension technology, age reversal pills. I mean, you can go look this stuff up now.
Sure.
It's all out there. And of course, the elites or any world leaders or whoever it is might have access to that stuff that we just simply don't. So that's all fascinating.
Right.
And I want to ask you a question, a few questions, but I see your sign behind you. Why do they mutilate cows? So I'm very curious to know what your research has led you to believe about the cattle mutilations because Stephen Greer comes out and says it's all our own military, pretending like it's aliens doing it, and this whole secret program.
Why?
Right. Well, Stephen Greer is very. I don't believe everything he says. I think he's being used in a large capacity, but I'm very curious to know what your thoughts are on the cattle mutilations.
Well, um, my college education, I minored in ancient art history, and I studied the Great Flood, and read Fraser's work. There were at the time there were 500 separate flood myths known, all from different cultures all around the world. And we now know that the Great Flood really did happen 13,000 odd years ago, and it was the Younger Dryas
Mhm.
comet impact. We think that humanity was more advanced 13,000 years ago than we give them credit for.
Mm-hmm.
And they saw the Younger Dryas catastrophe in their future, warned all the peoples of the world that it was coming and to build an ark or go to high ground or whatever. But we think, just like the Deep Impact movie, where Plan B to survive was to sink these deep underground facilities uh, and put 50,000 of your brightest and best people down there. We think that's exactly what happened. And then they didn't come back to the surface after the cataclysm because the climate change was so drastic that you couldn't have grown crops on the surface in the northern hemisphere for 1,000 years, and humans had to go. The few survivors on the surface had to go back to essentially being hunter gatherers to survive. And so we think they're down there, and they took herd animals with them when they went down. And we think living underground is making both the population of the aliens and the animals less viable over time. And we think they need regular fusions of DNA from surface dwelling beasts.
Interesting. Yeah, I love the way you answered that, and a lot of what you're saying, it really does. Like I'm in the middle of reading this book, and it's funny that everything you're saying. You guys would actually love this book
I'm
because
going to read that book, I
be,
promise.
because it fills in. It has everything you're saying, but incredible details. Like this is whistleblower testimony. It was written in the 80s, but the book, the men who wrote it died. I think they were potentially killed. And then it never saw the light of day until somebody finally found the material and published it in 2013. But
Wow.
everything in this book is 1980 prior, and it contains an incredibly detailed history of not just extraterrestrial involvement with the military, but also Hollow Earth, Inner Earth, and what we actually know about it that has been engineered we've been programmed and engineered to believe that's just not the case, and it's
Right.
just fascinating. But everything you're saying, it dovetails with what's in that book. So I all that to just say, anyone's interested in the book, read it. But I also do believe that you guys are onto something there. And so you believe that, yeah, I think Stephen Greer's claim that it's just all military abducting them. I think that is a look here, not there type of distraction, right? What do you think about that?
I think he's been gotten to, or he's got an agenda, or he's basically been told, okay, we need you to say this, whatever, like for for how many years Bob Lazar was basically thrown under the bus that he never worked for the military, he never worked there, and he's talking about Element 115. It turns out he's right.
Right.
Okay, and that now
Yeah.
he's finally he's being vindicated
And
after all these decades.
and
Okay,
subsequent whistleblowers are just backing him up all these years. So
right.
Yeah.
yeah, we think he was a
And
stand up.
what makes more sense? Okay, all right, that you have aliens coming here. that are traveling hundreds of light years, 10 to hundreds of light years, just bugging the Shaw family for 150 years, toying around with the DNA, stealing my sperm, and things like that, and basically toying with us for 150 years for
Right.
what purpose? Or that there is a race that is advanced humans that have direct access to our DNA, need our DNA, can breed with us because they are us, that they're here.
Right.
Listen, I was a cave explorer in my early 20s. I did some wild, wild cave exploring. I mean, some weird crawl through mud, going through these passages. Like, I've also been there. You know what? The safest place to be in an earthquake? Be in a cave,
Yeah.
because
Underground.
you don't feel the impact. It travels.
Yep.
It's like click clacks. You feel it at the beginning, but you don't feel it at the top. You don't feel it
Right.
in the middle. So
Right.
yeah, obviously, being underground, subsurface is going to be a safe place to be. Derinkuyu in Turkey.
I think that was built.
That's 300 miles inland.
I think that was dug prior to the flood and has been repurposed a few times over the thousands of years,
Right.
since then. But some of the tools they found at the very deepest recesses of the cave are testing as
Oh
12,000
yeah, and
plus years old.
and plus the kingdom of Enki, the Abzu, has been found due to satellite technology. Now
Yeah.
we know that there was an Anunnaki city bigger than Los Angeles and San Francisco put together
Right.
down at South Africa and today's Mozambique. I mean, you can see all the outlines of it that go back to over 200,000 years ago.
Yeah.
The LiDAR discoveries,
Yeah.
also under the pyramids. I guess it's SARS
They found
technology now.
over the last 20 years, Tellinger and Wade, they found at least 2,000 different mines, and they got Detritus going back to at least 212,000 years old. So
Yeah.
we
My
know that there was
Right.
an advanced city, an advanced culture down there in southern and South Africa, down around the time when Homo sapien was first being toyed with.
right.
So we
Yeah.
know these
Right.
things. Our technology is catching up to where we can actually substantiate what Sitchin was saying back in the 70s and the 80s. This is
And
Right.
being substantiated.
and I'd like to point out that rare DNA, alien DNA that has actually been tested is coming back as human.
Right.
And rare photos of aliens in captivity, they're showing sometimes with their no clothes on and they have nipples. That means they're lactating mammals.
That's right.
So we think they evolved here. And if aliens are involved at all, we think it's possible that the Anunnaki were aliens that uplifted
To make
humanity.
us slaves, not because they cared about us.
And possibly there is still a small contingent of Anunnaki running the underground world, but the
Mhm.
vast majority of aliens are human.
Yeah.
And they're
Right.
in the alien abduction phenomenon, there's about 10% of abductees are women who are being impregnated and their fetus is stolen at about 4 months into the pregnancy. And they are not being in vitro fertilized, which would mean maybe they are alien hybrids or something that are being genetically modified. What's happening instead is that women are reporting being raped by aliens
Mhm.
Right.
and getting pregnant. And I'm sorry, if you're having sex and getting pregnant, then that's human. You can't
Yep.
be anything
You have to be
else.
99.97% the same genetically to throw a viable offspring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that
No.
close.
Yeah. I agree that that's definitely happening. It's it's interesting to me. I mean, if you listen to some of the early testimonies, a lot of the extraterrestrials that were encountered were human looking. In fact, Betty and Barney Hill, if you listen to the actual recording of that regression, what did she say that she saw on the craft? A German officer,
Right.
a German officer, and that's a detail that gets overlooked all the time. But there is a very interesting history of the German flying saucer program and time travel and stuff that they were working on. So
Yeah.
and working with the Vril who were they claim to be extraterrestrial, but they look exactly human. So either ETs aren't necessarily as ET looking as we thought, and they could look exactly like human in a lot of cases. I think it's all not I don't think it's that black and white. I think there's a number of things happening.
Well, their sperm is penetrating our eggs.
Right.
So
Right.
can't be anything but a human. That's all they can be. And, like I say, if it was in vitro fertilization, then okay, maybe it's genetic modification, but not just
Right.
Well, we
sex.
started doing that in the 80s where we can basically determine whether, like if you've seen the movie Boys from Brazil, they're
Yes, I
messing around
have.
in the 30s. They're in the 30s, basically washing out the X and Y chromosomes to determine whether you're going to throw twins. You can determine the twins going to be boys or girls. Okay,
Yeah.
so we were messing around with clones with that, sheep, Daisy, whatever it was called back in the 80s, right? So we've been messing
Dolly.
around with this stuff ourselves. Okay,
Yeah, it was
And
Dolly the sheep. Yeah.
Dolly, yeah.
sorry,
No,
again, did
no,
it
it's fine.
again.
Here's our latest book, by the way.
Yeah, it's
They
it's
are
the same book, but we did a second edition with a forward by Karen Wilkinson,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
the latest UFO news, of course, was added because
Cool.
so this
And
published last
Karen
October.
Wilkinson's book is Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest.
Yeah, really a good book
And
too.
she's also ex-military, comes from a military family,
Mhm.
right.
and all these things happening to her. Has had 4 children that are hybrids, and
Yeah,
her take on it is
absolutely.
that their agenda is that they want to replace us. Okay,
Yep.
that they are us, but they said, you guys are just basically, you guys are too much trouble.
Right.
You guys are problems. You guys are screwing things up. So basically, she said that she's met her 4 children and said they don't like her. They basically think that
They have contempt for
they have
her.
contempt.
Yeah.
They basically said they don't have souls. She's very Christian, that they don't have souls like we have souls. But their whole thing is that they want to replace Homo sapiens sapien with their version. Okay.
And I
Interesting.
think Admiral Byrd's the thing that happened to Admiral Byrd, there's an intelligence report from the Soviet Union that was made into a documentary for Russian television in 1986, I believe.
Yeah.
And we've seen it, the English dubbed version of it, of course. And
Hi again. Hi, Aaron.
hey, there he
Hey.
is.
Hey again, sorry about that.
So Admiral Byrd was the Operation High Jump. We think that the mission was ostensibly to go down and destroy what they thought was a Nazi base under the ice sheet.
Correct.
But
That's
when they got
precisely
there,
what this says too. This
Yeah.
book goes all into that. Yeah.
Ostensibly, yeah.
when they got there, a squadron of flying saucers emerged from the ocean and attacked them
Right.
and sank a destroyer and downed half his carrier-based aircraft. And we think that he didn't want, and we think Admiral Byrd didn't want to go back to Washington and say, well, we were attacked by flying saucers. I don't know nothing about them. So we think he got in one of his planes to get some information on who just kicked his butt. And we think he flew over the ice sheet, and a whistleblower testimony has confirmed that there is this colossal hole with ramps going into it in the Queen Maud Land ice sheet.
Correct.
And we think he flew down into the underworld and had the meeting that's described in his diary. And
Yep.
of course, they're coming out saying, oh, it's been debunked. And I said, which part? The part where his son found his diary? I mean,
Right.
and then if you'd go to the Library of Congress for our book, I wanted to get a photo of Admiral Byrd.
This is interesting here.
Just for, that was under public domain that I could use for the book, right? And I discovered that Admiral Byrd, anything to do with Admiral Byrd, is classified still. This is over 80 years ago,
Right.
and you still can't find anything on Admiral Byrd.
Right.
Very hard to find it.
Just a few little references. Oh, but he had this stellar career, and there should be mountains of information there.
He was the youngest Navy admiral in Navy history.
But they're still classifying something from 80 years ago that supposedly has nothing to do with UFOs, but obviously does.
Yeah, and that book again has a number of chapters on Admiral Byrd, and
Good.
We have
And
just one.
yeah, but no, it's all it's everything you're saying is
Mhm.
corroborated, but there's even more detail on how it even got to that point and stuff that we just we're not supposed to know about. But also, there's a Hollow Earth whistleblower, military Air Force whistleblower, Billy Woodard. You may have heard of him or not, but he was fast tracked to the military for certain very specific reasons. And one of the first things he was given to read was Admiral Byrd's diary, and he thought, and the first question he asked was like, "Oh, I thought this was debunked." And said, "No, it's real." And but this one's different than the one floating around online. And study this and remember it because little did he know he was gonna become this liaison between some of these inner Earth societies and fascinating testimony. But there's all these data points that you have to ignore. Like, okay, if it's been debunked, then explain this, you know. So uh, Aaron, welcome back, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
I was getting ready to wrap it up, but now you're here. So,
Ah, came back at
um,
such a good point. You guys talking about Admiral Byrd.
right.
Finally
Uh,
got around to it.
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
We think,
fascinating. Yeah, it's one of those things that like they say they tell you it's debunked, so you don't look
Mhm.
into it. Because if you
yeah.
actually looked into it, you'd realize
The
there's something
biggest
there.
tell for me, the biggest tell for me is always how loud they protest.
Right.
The woman doth
Mhm.
protest too much,
Ex-
The lady.
Okay, the lady
Exactly.
doth protest too much.
Exactly.
Shakespeare. You just know your Shakespeare. It's like, you know what? Okay. If they're putting this much time and they're basically trying to get people to say, "Oh, well, that's been debunked." You know what? What really shocked me, but I guess it doesn't shock me, is that 12% of the United States population, a full 12% still think we never went to the moon. 12%.
Right.
That's
Right.
Right.
40 million people plus.
As we gear up to go back.
10%,
Right.
And they're
of
mostly flat earthers probably too.
Yeah.
yeah,
Unfortunately.
10% say that the earth is flat.
Yeah.
You got 35 million people and you got 45 million people, depending how you figure it. But
Mhm.
that's a large number of people that, you know, that still believe that, the earth is flat and we didn't go to the moon.
I wanted to,
Right.
we were talking about how, uh, the aliens living underground have us as tenants in their attic practically, right?
Yeah,
That,
that's what I see.
and, they think of us as, the 8 billion obnoxious boobs on the surface, right? And they actually said it that way to Byrd, kind of. They said, well, we usually have nothing to do with you the surface
Yeah.
people
I call it
Barbarians up
surfy.
there.
and your barbaric
Yeah.
wars, but so they think of us as barbarians.
Called my son all the time too. My
Yeah,
son.
he was nice to him, but and of course, Admiral Byrd describes him as a man.
Right.
Mhm.
With a
Of
slightly
Germanic.
Germanic accent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's a whole real story there. And yeah, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating history, but absolutely, there's humans living inside the planet and extraterrestrials, according to other material that have been here longer than far longer before humans were even a thought,
Sure. There's
according.
evidence of phosphenes in certain rock layers going back hundreds of millions of years to show that we were industrial. Like we could have actually been walking with the dinosaurs. I saw stuff when
Yeah.
I was still an acupuncturist, still practicing. I had a patient that really liked my stuff. He gave me back in the 90s. He gave me archaeology, Forbidden Archaeology by Cremo. I read this
Yeah.
back
fascinating
in the
book.
mid
Yeah. Great
90s,
book.
the Forbidden Archaeology, and even stuff around the Sonora area, Table Mountain, just outside of Sonora. They were finding stuff in 200,000-year-old soil layers that was supposed to be impossible to be there. I saw a documentary where they were uncovering dinosaur footprints, actually uncovering the mountain and tracing the dinosaur footprints on the rock, on the sedimentary rock, with human footprints next to it, which they didn't
Mhm.
plant there ahead of time.
Right.
This was being actually excavated at the time. So we
Yep.
know
Right.
that humanoids were around during the time of the dinosaurs.
And
Now, were they time travelers or were they actually coexisting?
you're misremembering, my dear.
Millions of years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Table Mountain skull that was found was in 5 million-year-old soil.
Okay, I'm
Mhm.
misremembering that, but I'm not
Yeah.
misremembering the other stuff.
Oh
You
no,
know,
you're just wanted to correct that one thing.
no, this is fascinating too. There's a man that lives near me here in Sedona. He's a quantum physicist who claims to have worked 40 years in the shadow government. Started in the Air Force and was brought in due to test scores to work on Philadelphia experiment and some other stuff.
Sure.
And he was telling me about this extensive underground tunnel network that he had been in and was very familiar with. And I said, how old was it? He goes, well, a lot of them are modern. We've been digging them for the last 70 years with very advanced boring machines. But he said some of them are so old we don't know how long they've been here. And he said that he was there at one point when this team came in, a military hired team of archaeologists or whoever these scientists were, to come in and date one of these tunnels. And to their best guess, it was at least millions. It was just millions of years old. And it was just perfectly bored out, looked like it was done with this very advanced technology. And they don't, it's so old they can't even put a date on it, right? But it's in the millions. And that's what he told me.
Right.
They, their best guess, and these have to be the top uh, scientists in the world if they're being brought in by the shadow government. Like, come tell us how old this cave system is, right? So,
Right.
believe it or not, it's just another data point that leads us to believe like whatever has been going on this planet for all this time is we've been lied to. Obviously, we know that, but even I wonder if some of the people that are in the know even really understand how what actually happened.
Right. They yeah,
Right.
unless there's like a vault somewhere of the history of the Earth for the past, 500 million years,
Right.
like, who's been
And
doing
there
what.
could be.
Well, there's the Vatican Library that a lot of people claim. There are books that are very old or that at least tell of this, very ancient history that we haven't been told about. And
Yes,
that's
I'd
why they're
love
keeping
to
it hidden
be able
from
to get
us.
into that.
Right. And that's why they don't want any of us seeing that because, they
Well,
got to keep the charade going and keep us believing lies.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, th this has been fascinating. Thank you guys for coming on and sharing all this. Is there anything
Yeah.
that we didn't cover? Any
yeah,
final words you'd like to
yeah.
leave us with?
I want to impart one little piece of wisdom. Okay. All right. And then people are going to think that I'm crazy, but I'm not. Telepathy is not the most advanced form of communication. It is the first form of
Probably our
communication.
most primitive.
It
Yeah.
is the number one first form. That is why the aliens or our cousins don't have to speak 10,000 different languages because a tree is a tree is a tree. It's a chemical
Yeah.
reaction. When you lay down the pathway to remember a tree, whether it's sequoia or an oak or whatever, you don't have to remember how to say tree in German or tree in English or tree in whatever language. It's because it's a
Right.
chemical pathway to get basic ideas across. Telepathy is the first form of communication. Then we went to pictographic languages and that kind of stuff. Every time we do another derivation or away from telepathy, we move away from our God-given gift.
And we think that telepathy is actually a human trait that has atrophied in us,
Mhm.
but not in our cousins.
Right, because they've had
Yeah.
to rely on different things. They've been able to develop that thing that is basically like a
Mhm.
vestigial in modern human in human beings. We're basically like just real quick. We're working at 40 cycles per second right now, having this conversation. You need to be down about 4 to 6 cycles per second to really do telepathy correctly. That's why they communicate with us in the astral realm and deep forms of meditation. Telepathy is something that we have. Just like everybody can bioluminesce. Human beings bioluminesce. But the deeper you get into meditation, the more people can bioluminesce.
And
It
we
is-
think that they're bioluminescing more because they're troglodytes.
right.
We see these as mutations. The differences between our peoples, we see them as mutations you would expect to see in
Bigger eyes.
troglodytes, bigger eyes, clear hair,
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
bioluminescence,
Also skinnier arms. The thing in Harari's book Sapiens, they say the bigger the brain, the bigger the drain. Okay, so the more you have to use your brain, the skinnier your arms are going to become because that's what happens because the body delegates more power and more calories to the brain. We only have 4% of our body mass is our brain, but it takes 25% of our energy. So that's why you see the Greys, they have proportionately much bigger heads and much skinnier bodies. Think about
Interesting.
that.
And
That's-
the thing I would like to tell people is that Hitler's Thule Society, they believed that it was the survivors of Atlantis that had gone under the ice sheet.
Yeah.
And they called themselves the Ariani. And it seems to me that the data coming out of the Doñana bird sanctuary in southern Spain is the lidar is showing concentric rings in the delta, and Atlantis is supposed to have been an island, not a continent way out in the ocean. It's there were bridges connecting it to the mainland. So, an island in a delta, river delta, that would make sense that you could have bridges connecting to the mainland. And there's all this rubble out in the ocean floor outside of this area that look like cut stones, exactly like you would expect to see if a tsunami filled your city with water and dragged it out into the ocean.
Right.
And if Atlantis was there, and if it was there prior to the Younger Dryas impact, it would have been absolutely at ground zero for the worst of the tsunami activity, right on the Atlantic coast. Because the Younger Dryas left a debris field from Georgia to Canada on the east coast of the U.S. and from Spain to I think it's England on the west side of Europe. So obviously, it struck the main bulk of it would have struck the Atlantic Ocean, and we're talking about 2,000 foot high tsunamis
Right.
hitting the city,
You
and
know,
so that's what we think happened to Atlantis, and it's right where it's supposed to be, right where Plato said it was supposed to be.
right. And
Right.
um again, I'm just gonna keep you this funny. There's a whole
There's a
a whole
lot of
history. So basically, some of the inner Earth inhabitants they frequent the surface, and then this one guy who claims to be a descendant of one of the early Atlanteans. Actually, this was in the 1977. He came to the surface and on a 5-year visa, Iceland visa, and he ended up teaching at George Washington University in Boston, Massachusetts. Well, the author found this guy and they interviewed him and he gave them, and it's a transcribed interview in this book, he gave them a detailed story of the destruction of Atlantis that's taught inner Earth to his people. And what's fascinating is a lot of what you said corroborates, but there's so much more that we just don't know, but it's in this book. And he said that there's 28, I think 28 domed cities at the bottom of our ocean. He said that, so once the initial flood happened, like that took a lot of them by surprise. But then there was these fluctuating ocean levels afterwards for years to come,
Sure.
and more cities that survived the first part, they kept, they were later destroyed. Well, they were able to predict what was going to happen. So they had built these domes over the remaining Atlantean outpost, and they're now sitting at the bottom of our ocean because they were flooded. Eventually, they weren't underwater at one point, but now they are. So these domes were actually built ahead of time according to this
Sure.
information. And they say it's just built with this advanced technology, this impenetrable material that we don't use now. But
Sure.
fascinating to think that, so we think, oh, the military is building some of this stuff, and they are, but some of this stuff has been here the entire time, and not all the Atlanteans actually died, according to this.
That's
So,
right. They just like in Deep Impact, they sank a underground facility and saved their brightest and best.
right.
We
Yeah,
think.
so
All right.
this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please tell the audience again where they can get your book and watch the documentary and about your podcast and all that stuff.
Super. Here's what the book looks like again. It's Who They Are and What They're Up To by Leslie and Stephen Shaw.
Forward by Karen Wilkinson.
And our podcast is Abductions 101, UFOs and the Paranormal Connection. And we're on YouTube channel. If you've forgotten that long name, just type Abductions 101 into YouTube. We're about the second thing down. And then we're also releasing all our episodes slowly on Spotify and iHeart and Apple as well.
And our documentary is called Who They Are, which is also on YouTube and Roku and Tubi and
Yeah, it's on
that's
it finally made it to real television and Apple TV, Plex, Zumo, Fawesome, and Tubi, you said?
Relay.
And Relay. Yes, that's right. So it's easy to check that out too. You have to actually type in who they are because sometimes it's on their search thing and sometimes it's not. But
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you for sharing all that. And thank you for coming on today. And this was great. Keep doing what you're doing. I encourage everyone to get the book. That link is in the description. I showed the other link, but it didn't copy as a link. So I need to update that to the documentary and your YouTube channel. But I'll fix that. But either way, the information's in the description below. And Aaron, whenever you left, people in the chat were like, wait, Aaron has a son? So
Stepson.
yeah, you might want to clarify.
we'll
Yeah.
have to see pictures now.
Right.
Yes, it's stepson.
Yeah.
I call them both, you know.
Right. Well, hey, you made it back, and for the very good conversation.
Yeah,
So,
no one had communicated to me that I had to pick him up twice. I had to pick him up and then take him to something else. Yeah, so
Yeah, I
sorry
figured,
about that.
yeah,
I didn't know.
something like that.
no
Usually what
worries.
happens.
No worries. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, guys. Today has been a pleasure, and we thank you for joining us. And if anybody in the chat is interested in joining us in Hawaii or buying a virtual pass, you can do so at journeytotruth.online. That link is below as
Great.
well.
Oh, and if they want to ask us any questions directly, they can DM us on Instagram. Our Instagram is leslie.shaw.author.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. That's how we connected originally.
Right.
So, and if you go to Journey to Truth's Instagram page, you'll find their page linked in the recent post, the promo for this episode. So that's another way to find it. And yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much. This has been a
Thanks, guys.
pleasure.
Thanks, Troy. Thanks,
Yeah,
Aaron.
Yeah.
so
Yep.
much,
Have
guys.
have a great
Peace and
day.
prosperity.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Have a great day and we'll talk soon.
You too.